If you're watching this on Facebook, I have no idea if you're watching this on Facebook because it's kind of a mystery to me if it's working or not. So hopefully it is. Welcome to all who are watching this live or the recording after the fact. I am Jamie Hartman. This is my weekly question and answer session for April 16th. 2020. Quick disclaimer, I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner and I do not diagnose or treat any disease. And this information is presented as general information only, should not be used as a substitute for medical advice. Always consult with your own medical provider before making any changes to your diet, supplement, medication, or exercise programs. So I'm going to jump right in. I really have just highlighted one main question for today. If I have time, I can take some other questions, perhaps from people who might tune in live or other things I can talk about. But I think it's a great question and one that has many things that I can talk about that will be helpful for all of us. So the question, the focus question today comes from Andrea, and it is a great one. I'm so glad that she asked this. What are the best AIP foods for calming the mind and the body? I think we're in a period of a lot of stress for a lot of people. And so this is something that we can all benefit from, whether we're feeling a need to be calmed right now or want to just file this away for the future. So I have some notes, so forgive me if you see me looking back and forth a lot. I want to make sure I cover everything that I think, would be useful. So I've made some notes ahead of time. And I want to approach this from two directions. So first I'll talk about kind of in the moment when you're feeling frazzled, when you're feeling anxious, feeling stressed, and you want to calm right now. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But then I also want to talk about how do we build a foundation using our food choices so that we keep a steady mind and body and we don't feel those highs and lows as much. I mean, we're always going to. Life happens. And there are times when you get keyed up despite everything you've done to prevent that and to stay stable. It still happens. So it's important to recognize that and to be forgiving of yourself for that. That this is reality. This is real life. You are going to have those times when you feel like you're in desperate need of something calming and want to turn to some of these tools in your toolbox. But our goal is to also be building our resilience, building our energy stores, building our strength, our physical, mental, and emotional strength, so that we don't have the highs and lows quite as much and can more easily draw upon the resources that we have within us and the outside resources that will help us in the moments of extreme stress. So I have nothing else to share on the screen. So I think what I'll do is just take the sharing off so you see my face larger and I can just talk directly to you. So I'm going to see if I can stop the sharing. Okay, great. So now you should be able to see me, and it does look, now that I'm back here, like we are actually perhaps successful. Well, I don't know if we're successful sharing to Facebook or not. Yeah, it looks like it is working. So great. I'm gonna just try to keep that in the background. So to answer the question about calming the mind and the body, first of all, in the moment, when you're feeling stressed and you want something immediately, available to calm you, some of the things that you can utilize, even on AIP, that are, the same that other people might go to, you get advice in other places to use these, would be herbal remedies, like herbal teas, like a chamomile tea that is perfectly fine for AIP and can have a very calming effect for many people. Another tea that not everybody is as familiar with as chamomile is rooibos. It's spelled Rooibos. So if you're looking for rooibos tea, it has lovely flavor as well. It can also be rather calming for many people. So both of those teas can be completely fine, and you can use those without any concern really to whether or not these are AIP or not. Of course, individuals can find that a certain tea is not, helpful for them. They may have a sensitivity to it, but as far as AIP is concerned, those are fine. Another thing that you'll see other people will talk about in general is using adaptogenic herbs. They might be in a tea form or in a pill form, a supplement form, a tincture. But you'll hear that term adaptogenic. And in general, these are fine also for people who are following AIP. So the name suggests, what it is, that it's adapting to your needs, being adaptogenic. But there is one caveat to that. If you see in a combination of herbs or a standalone herb, ashwagandha, that is a nightshade. And not everybody knows that. I think it's becoming more and more commonly kind of out there in the world, but I actually find many times even doctors are not that aware of it. I'll have people come to me from their doctor and their doctor says, my doctor told me to take these herbs and go on AIP. And we look at it and we realize that that supplement, those herbal supplements they were given, has ashwagandha in it, and ashwagandha is a nightshade, so it's not going to work very well for them to do both of those things, so we're getting a better education there. That's not to say that this is ashwagandha is a harmful herb. It's just contraindicated if you're doing AIP because it is a nightshade. So we'd want to eliminate it. Maybe later you can try using it. But there are two that have similar functions that you can mention to your doctor. So they suggest ashwagandha, or you've heard about it as a useful adaptogenic herb. And they are rhodiola. So rhodiola is a good alternative for ashwagandha. And then another one that some people will find helpful is, it's got a funny name, but it's 2 words, holy basil. And I always think that's just a great name because it's like holy basil. But that one is another one that can be a calming adaptogenic herb. And again, that might be found in a tincture and a pill form, or it might be even in a tea. I've seen it combined with green tea, which will have a little caffeine then, because it's a green tea has caffeine in it, which may or may not be what you're looking for if you're feeling stressed, but it can be a nice combination if maybe you're feeling like you are stressed and you also need to keep your energy up. So that can be a good option. And so that's talking about kind of in the moment, like what do you do if you're feeling frazzled and you need to calm down? What's okay as far as AIP goes? That's kind of how I interpreted Andrea's question, as being, if I'm feeling like I can't manage right now whatever's happening and I need to calm down, what can I use? So that's that part of it. But what I really wanted to use our time today is to talk about some of the foundational supports for helping you to have a calmer mind and body. Some of these are good for us to just be eating more of or consuming more of or mindful of no matter what, but especially if we're facing a lot of stress, if we're facing a need to deal with anxiety and to calm down a little bit. First of all, nutrients. And again, I apologize for looking back and forth to my notes for people who are watching this, but nutrients to consider to help you better withstand highs and lows in terms of stress. Zinc is an important one, and one that many people who experience anxiety may be deficient in. This isn't a universal, I can't diagnose that, of course, but it is something that is relatively a common connection. So if you're feeling a lot of anxiety, always look to your diet, look to all the tools you have to help manage that anxiety. But one of the things is your diet. And if your diet's been for a while some relatively nutrient poor, you are probably deficient in some nutrients. And one of the ones that's common is zinc. And zinc is found in many different foods, but one of the best sources of it are oysters. So that's a quick fix if you're deficient in zinc, is to eat some oysters. Oysters are also high in iron, and iron deficiency anemia can also be kind of part of that anxious feeling that people have where they're feeling really revved up and need to find some calming. So oysters are a great option there. Now, I recognize that in this moment in time where we are, many of us are sheltering in place or even quarantined, or living in the middle of the country where oysters are nowhere near us. This is not always that easy when you think of oysters in the kind of classical sense of eating them off the shell, eating them raw or broiled or whatever. But one little tip for you is that they're very inexpensive and shelf stable and really easy to prepare are canned oysters. They're not everybody's favorite food to eat, but they have, they come smoked, they come in olive oil, so they can be very flavorful if you like them. If you don't like the texture, one of the things I like to do with them is to turn them into a pate. I put the whole can with the olive oil and everything in my little food processor. Sometimes I combine it with a can of sardines also if I feel like I need the sardine benefit, which includes some calcium and some other nutrients. Blend it up with maybe some parsley, some lemon juice, some green onion if I feel like it, or leave that out if I'm, worried about serving this to somebody who has a kind of a FODMAP sensitivity. I would only include that part of the onion, or leave it out if you didn't want the onion flavor. But the idea is to kind of maybe mask that fishy flavor a little bit if it's not your favorite thing. And then I like to eat it with plantain chips. That's a great snack for myself. And so while that combination, that little snack, is probably not going to calm you down in the moment of feeling really stressful, it might, and it'll definitely give you some nutrients that many of us are deficient in. So that's one big nutrient to consider, zinc. And I've just given you a tip for a food that's high in zinc that you can eat, because as anybody watching these regularly knows, my preference when I'm working with my clients is to always look for food sources of nutrients before talking about supplements. You're going to absorb them better. They're going to come packaged with the other accessory nutrients that you need in order to best utilize them. So that's why oysters are a big one for me. If you can't get oysters, you could try other shellfish too. They're relatively high in zinc. So maybe clams are easier for you to get. Maybe mussels, you get an opportunity to get some mussels and cook them. Those are also options that will have a similar nutrient profile. A couple other nutrients that can be helpful for making sure that you are able to withstand the times when it's hard to be calm. Vitamin D, being just low in vitamin D can in and of itself provoke anxiety concerns for people. And then also having all the B vitamins that you need in your diet in order to process everything. The whole detoxification cycle is dependent on B vitamins. So B12, B6, folate, all of those B vitamins. Now, where do we get those? Well, they're in a lot of things, but your number one best source for this combination is going to be liver. So if you can get yourself to enjoy eating liver in some form and then eat it once or twice a week, that is a win. Last week, somebody asked about the powdered liver capsules. Those are fine if that's all you can do. They are really not very cost effective for a long-term solution though. So I really push my clients to explore some different recipes. I've got several on my blog that you can look at. Mickey Trescott has some others that I think are really good, that you can get yourself used to eating some liver. Again, it's the same principles with those canned oysters. I like turning it into a pate so that I'm not having to chew it and really taste it all by itself. It's mixed with other flavors. So liver will give you vitamin D. It'll give you those B vitamins. It'll give you the iron too, and a little bit of the zinc that we need. So all the nutrients we've been talking about. And then there are a couple minerals too that can be very helpful for people. One, I'll just talk about kind of as there is a supplement option for, and that is magnesium. We've all heard probably that you can take like a hot bath with Epsom salts and that'll be relaxing. And so that's because it's magnesium, and our bodies can absorb that magnesium through the skin. But you also can get it in your diet. And then potassium is another nutrient, another mineral that is helpful for people who are experiencing a lot of anxiety that we want to look at and make sure they're getting enough of. So for those two nutrients, I really strongly recommend people try to eat some leafy greens. And also you can look at avocados as another option for getting in some potassium. Avocados are a good source of potassium. So if you kind of just review everything I've just talked about, that's really a foundation of that nutrient dense diet that, we're always talking about for autoimmune health in general. And for this particular question about calming the mind and body, they are especially helpful. So that was, again, foods that are high in zinc and iron. So oysters were the good example there. Foods that are high in liver, or high in, excuse me, vitamin D and the B vitamins, so liver. Foods that are high in potassium and magnesium, so leafy greens, and avocados are another good option to include. When you think about that list too that I gave you, one of the things you'll notice is that what's not on there is anything really high in sugary things. I mean, we don't eat refined sugar on AIP anyway, but we also want to be mindful of how much the high sugar foods that we're consuming overall. You don't need to limit fruit. That's a common misconception people have often on AIP. You don't even need to be completely sugar-free on AIP. We do want to limit, or at least, eliminate or extremely limit refined sugar, but some honey, some sweeteners are okay. However, when you're experiencing blood sugar dysregulation, say you're eating a really high amount of sugar and you have that high blood sugar level that happens, and then your insulin has to ramp up in order to manage that, then you'll have a blood sugar crash afterwards, and that roller coaster will go back and forth. That is very the opposite of calming. That is a really kind of stressful cycle to be on. So I'm not, again, saying limit those foods, but the more of these other things that you're eating, the more of the really nutrient-dense protein sources and vegetables, that is going to help blunt all of those blood sugar ups and downs. And I have another thing. That's why I wanted these notes. Another thing I wanted to comment on is that a lot of people in Western society eating a Western diet are not getting enough omega-3 fatty acids. So we want to, I think most people I talk to these days have kind of heard the message that what we were taught a couple decades ago about, you have to eat a low-fat diet to be healthy was somewhat misguided. And we do need to eat fat to be healthy, but not all fats are created exactly the same. In fact, they all are different. They vary, and you need a balance. And most people do not get enough of this one type of fat, omega-3 fatty acids. And so eating more salmon, fatty fish is a great way to do that. A lot of people will jump to taking a fish oil supplement. But again, as I said at the top of this, I'm not a big fan of supplements. I want people to get the nutrients from their whole food. So salmon is a good thing to add for helping you weather the storms. And then grass-fed beef is another great choice. And grass-fed beef is also going to contain iron and zinc and B vitamins and some vitamin D, not a lot, but some. So all together, these foods will make a great foundation for anybody's diet who is looking to manage emotions and calm the mind and the body. So those are the nutrients to consider. The next topic I wanted to talk about briefly was that a lot of times if you're doing all of this, so say you've got this great diet, you're eating all of these things, and you're still really feeling like you are having a hard time staying calm, feeling a lot of anxiety, you might want to consider whether you're having some bacterial imbalance in your gut. And bacterial dysbiosis, we'll hear that term used. I don't necessarily mean something that's like going to show up on a stool sample. A lot of people think in order to find that out, I have to go get a very expensive test done. And in reality, those tests don't always give you the whole picture. So it's sometimes wise to just start experimenting with the things that we know should address gut bacteria imbalance. So thinking about probiotics, but again, my preference is going to be probiotics that are natural. So fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, although remember on AIP with kimchi, you're gonna have to be careful because most kimchi that you'd buy in a store pre-made by somebody else will have nightshades in it. But fermented vegetables in general, as a general topic, can be a great thing to add. You can also look to trying some kombucha, some kefir, although we want to stay away from dairy kefir while we're on AIP until you've tried to reintroduce that. And then that alone might make a difference. And if so, that can be very indicative that, this is something you want to address. And then you want to think about, well, are you providing the microbes in your gut the right food to feed upon? So thinking about some prebiotic foods can be very helpful there. And so this is sometimes challenging, actually, when we go onto AIP, because a lot of the prebiotic type foods that you might have had as options for you are no longer available. Like an obvious one, there's soluble fibers in things like oatmeal. We don't eat that on AIP. I often work with clients who I think this would be helpful for and suggest they take a supplement of a prebiotic fiber, but that's really a short-term solution. So we want to be thinking about what's feeding the gut bacteria as well. And again, you have to do a little bit of experimentation with this and see how you feel. I've had people tell me, report back that they started taking in some fermented foods. And although maybe I suggested they start with a small amount, they decided to eat a whole great big serving, and they felt very keyed up, very anxious afterwards. That was a clear sign that, yes, definitely this gut bacteria is playing a role in how they're feeling emotionally. And so then we can work with that. We can okay, well, now we're on the right track. Let's start to decrease the amount you're taking, slowly ramp up, see if we can support your gut bacteria in other ways. And the whole reason this is an issue is because serotonin is actually produced in the gut. And it's produced as part of that bacterial fermentation process. So it's helpful, it's important to support that gut bacteria. So that's one big area that I look at with my clients. And then after that, if that really is making a difference, then what I often suggest people look at are the neurotransmitters that may be helpful for supporting their ability to stay calm and to keep a steady mood. And I actually have people in this case now, after we've gone through everything else. So if we've thought about, okay, chamomile tea and rooibos tea and adaptogenic herbs when you're feeling really stressed, and then we've looked at nutrients and we're eating a really good diet and doing everything right, checking all the boxes there, looking at bacterial balance, the fermented foods, the prebiotics. If that is still not quite enough, hopefully we're seeing some improvement with that, but it's still not quite enough. Now we're going to look at maybe there are some supplemental forms of some neurotransmitters that you could be using. And so these are going to be amino acids for the most part. And the resource that I suggest people that I use with my clients or they use on their own, if they wanted to explore this on their own, is a book called The Mood Cure by Julia Ross. And in it, she talks about, specific experiences or specific instances in which particular neurotransmitters, particular amino acids like 5-HTP, or actually taking melatonin, or, GABA or L-theanine, whatever it is, she's got a process for you to go through and to figure out which one of these would be the best support. But you'll also know, if you read the whole book, she talks first about you've got to have a good diet, because that's really going to be the foundation for it. You can't just supplement your way out of a good diet. So I love that Andrea asked this question in terms of what foods, are good for calming the body and the mind, because that is what we're all about here, is figuring out how do we feed our body so that we can overcome some of the stressors of our life. So I'll just real quick review kind of the points that we made, because I know we're in the last few minutes. And that was that in the moment, you can try some chamomile tea, some rooibos tea, some adaptogenic herbs, but you want to stay away from ashwagandha. So if you're on AIP, no ashwagandha. And then thinking about the nutrients that you're eating. So having some nutrient-dense foods like oysters and liver and leafy greens and avocados and good omega-3 fatty acid sources like salmon and grass-fed beef. If you're doing all of that, that will help. And then looking at, at the same time, looking at whether you're supporting your gut bacteria. Maybe taking a probiotic, but again, see if you can get there with some naturally fermented foods rather than just taking, commercially produced sources that may or may not be AIP in their whole processing. And then prebiotic fibers. And then finally, if that doesn't work, looking at, maybe taking a supplement like a 5-HTP or a GABA supplement might be helpful for you, but rather than just kind of blindly taking those because maybe somebody else said it was good, take a look at, if you can't work with somebody like me to talk about, which ones of these would be right for you, take a look at that book that I mentioned, Julia Ross's The Mood Cure. So that was our big question for today, as I thought I would only have time to answer that one question. So I am glad that it was submitted, and I hope that anybody else watching this, that Andrea finds that answer helpful, and anybody else watching it also can learn from it. So thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to stop the recording now.